How's it going, everyone? So today we are talking about why I don't think in general you should be snapping on turn 6. I think it's too easy to get yourself in a bad spot that's not profitable, where you're going to be losing cubes consistently. However, I do think there are some outlying situations or some deck archetypes that you could be playing that kind of let you snap more often on turn 6, but I generally don't think it's a good idea for your average player. I'll explain why in this video, but if you haven't seen the last video on pot odds and equity, you should go back and watch that, kind of learn what I'm talking about there, because I'm going to be using some of those terms in this video. I want to preface all this with I'm not a poker professional. I've never been, but I am somebody who played poker as a hobby for a few years. I got really into the theory, I learned the fundamentals, and I saw how they apply to Marvel Snap. I've been passionate about video games since I was little, so kind of saw how they work together and decided to start a YouTube channel and talk about it. So if you like these videos, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell. Helps out a lot. Now, in general, when should you snap? Ideally, you want to snap before your advantage in a game is made clear to your opponent. A lot of the times this is going to be well before turn 6, maybe around turn 4 or 5. But once your opponent has seen what you're trying to do, it is much easier for them to make a decision to retreat or stay in based on whether they have you beat or not. So as a general rule, you want to snap before your advantage is made clear. And because by turn 6, a lot of the time your advantage is made clear, you can get yourself into some bad situations where you're actually becoming less profitable or not profitable in the spot that you're in. So in order to illustrate this, we're going to have to introduce 3 poker concepts, the first one being the most important, and that being expected value, or EV. Now what expected value is how much you expect to win on a given bet on average if you ran it an infinite amount of times. If your expected value is negative, it's not profitable and you should retreat. If it is 0, it's a break-even bet. And if your expected value is greater than 0, it's a profitable bet and you should continue. I'll put the equation down below how you calculate it, but in its simplest form, it's the percentage you're going to win times how much you're going to win minus the percentage you're going to lose times how much you're going to lose. Now you can have as many sets of these win percentages or loss percentages as you want based on, say, 25% of the time you're going to win 5 cubes, 25% of the time you'll win 3 cubes, and then 50% of the time you'll lose 2 cubes, whatever it is. Those are just random numbers. Don't worry about those. So as an example, let's say we flip a coin, we each put in $1, winner takes all. So to calculate our EV, you do 0.5, 50% chance to win, times the dollar, minus 0.5, 50% chance to lose, times the dollar you would lose. 1 minus 1, 0 EV. It's a break-even bet. Now, let's do the same scenario, same coin flip, same 50-50 odds, but I'll put in $2 and you put in $1. So if you win, you gain $2. If you lose $1. And we do the math again. 0.5 times the $2 that you would win minus 0.5 times the $1 that you would lose comes out to positive 0.5 EV, or plus 50 cents EV. So if we run this bet over and over, each time we run it, you should expect to win 50 cents. Now, in a game of poker or a game of Marvel Snap, every decision that you make, every bet you make, you want your EV to go up. If your EV is going down from a bet, it is a bad bet and you shouldn't continue. You're risking more to win less, and that doesn't make any sense. So your goal in each game should be to maximize your expected value. Now, the second concept we have to talk about is hand range. Hand range is basically just the range of hands that you put your opponent on at any given point in the game, or that he puts you on. At the start of the game, their hand range should be the biggest because you don't know what deck or cards he's playing. And as decisions are made, cards are played, the hand range is going to shrink down turn by turn until finally on turn 6, it's the smallest that it's been. Now using this hand range and what you have in your hand, you can calculate the equity of your hand versus his hand range, or your win percent versus his hand range. And with this win percent, you can decide whether you're going to stay in or snap or make the decision you're going to. Whether you know it or not, just trying to guess what card your opponent can have, you're already using this concept in your games now. So the third concept is called overbetting. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but in general in poker, the average size bet is going to be between half the pot and a full pot. In Marvel Snap, by the time you get to turn 6, the pot size is 2. The 1 cube you put in, the 1 cube your opponent has put in. So a normal poker size bet would be 1 more cube to continue, which is what it is when no one snaps. Or if you could bet 2 cubes to continue, 1 cube being half the size of the pot of 2, or 2 cubes being the full size of the pot. What snapping on turn 6 is betting 3 cubes into the pot of 2. This is called an overbet. And overbetting is used for 2 different things. First one is bluffing, and the second one is bluffing that you're bluffing. So when it comes to bluffing in Marvel Snap, I don't think you should implement it into your game very frequently. I think bluffing is the most effective when you're playing against the same opponent in hand after hand, where you can be bluffing sometimes, you can not be bluffing sometimes, and it's kind of a psychological game that people play in poker. In Marble Snap, you're playing against a random opponent each time, so bluffing as a tool is not as effective. Now, as you get higher ranks, you will repeatedly kind of play the same people here and there, so bluffing can be something that you implement, but I think in general, most players should stay away from it. So outside of bluffing, what does overbetting do? When you bet 3 cubes into the pot of 2, a lot of times what it does is it trims down the hands that you are beating and just keeps the hands around that are beating you. And this can be very dangerous because it can take an equity that you have that's really high and trim out so many hands that your equity goes from, say, 66% all the way down to 20%, 25%, 30%. And when your equity drops that low and then you recalculate your EV, a lot of the time it drops significantly, and sometimes it even goes to negative. And that's not what you want to be doing when you're the one making the decision to snap. So let's take an example where you have 66% equity in a hand against your opponent. Your opponent can have one of 3 cards, card A, card B, and card C. The card that you have in your hand beats card A and card B, but it loses to card C. So you're beating 2/3 of his hand range, therefore 66% equity. Now, when you calculate your expected value with your 66% equity, you go 0.66 times the 3 cubes that you would win, the one your opponent's going to put in, and the 2 in the pot, minus 0.33 times the 1 cube that you would lose. When you do this math, you get 2 minus 0.33, which equals positive 1.667 EV, which means if you continue with this hand each time, you can expect to gain 1.667 cubes. Now, it's important to note with Marble Snap, when you're steering and you're making your bet decisions, you want the game to go in a direction where you're making more than 1 EV. And the reason for this is because you committed 1 EV to get into the game. You want more than 1 EV just to net positive on the entire game. That's not to get confused that if you have positive 0.5 EV that you don't continue, you do. If you have greater than 0 EV, it is profitable to continue from the point on. But your goal when you're making decisions or snapping is you want to steer into as high of an EV as possible. So in this situation, without snapping, positive 1.667 EV. Now, let's consider the scenario when you snap. And let's say for this scenario, 50% of the hands retreat. So all of card A retreats, half of the people having card B retreat, the other half think you're bluffing and they stay around. And all of the people who have card C, because card C beats you, they're sticking around because they think they're pretty strong. So when we work this out, we do 0.5, 50% of the people that are retreating, times the 2 cubes you would make from the retreat, plus 0.1667 times the 5 cubes you would make from that half that stayed from card B, minus 0.33 times 3 of the people that have card C that you lose to. Again, the 2 cubes you make when someone retreats, you get the 2 that are in the pot. The 5 cubes you make when you win a snapped hand, the 3 from your opponent and the 2 that are in the pot. And then the 3 cubes that you lose when you snap, you have to put in 3 more cubes, you're losing those. So when we do this math, we get 1 plus 0.833 minus 1, which equals positive 0.833 EV. Which is significantly less. It's actually half the EV that we had originally if we didn't snap, which means if we just stayed in and we did not snap, we can expect to make 1.6 cubes. And by snapping, we bring our expected value down to 0.8 cubes, which bringing your EV down is not ideal, and you should not make decisions that force that to happen. So in this case, with this fold percentage and this equity, it's more profitable to not snap. Now for the second scenario, let's say you have a monster hand that beats 100% of your opponent's hand range, but it's a telegraphed hand. It's pretty clear that they can see what your hand is going to be. Maybe you're playing an Ultron on your Patriot deck or whatever it is. It's pretty clear. So 75% of the people are going to retreat, and the other 25% are stubborn. They don't believe you. They want to see you play the Ultron. So in this scenario, if you don't snap, we get 1, which is 100%, times the 3 cubes that you would win by not snapping, which equals a positive EV of 3 cubes, which is unbelievably good. Now, when we run the second scenario, we get 0.75, which is the 75% of the people retreating, times the 2 cubes that you would make when they retreat, plus 0.25, the 25% of you winning, times the 5 cubes that you would make. When you work this out, you get 1.5 plus 1.25, which equals positive 2.75 EV, which if you compare it to not snapping is actually less. Now, these are just 2 scenarios where it'll drop down. There's a lot of scenarios that when you snap, your EV goes negative or drops way too far, and you want to avoid those as much as possible because the more you have that you don't realize, the more holes that you have in your game that are exploitable. And on top of this, in poker, you have 5 to 10 minutes to calculate and figure out all this math and really get into the details of your equity and what EV you have in a given hand. In Marvel Snap, you don't have that. You have a limited time for the turn. You can't accurately calculate your EV every single time with all of the factors that contribute. And therefore, snapping on turn 6 makes it a lot more dangerous for your average player to do so because it can cause those holes in your game. So all this to say, I don't recommend snapping on turn 6. Now, there is a situation where I will snap on turn 6, and that's when both of our decks have like a telegraphed play. Say, again, I have an Ultron coming down, and maybe he has a Hela coming down, and his telegraphed play beats my telegraphed play every time. So he's pretty confident that he has me beat. But also in my hand, say I have something that counters that play. So in this case, a Cosmo that I can drop down, and I know I'm winning this hand. In this case, I don't mind you snapping. It's been profitable for me so far. I'm not quite sure how the math works and where all the math has to line up exactly. So I'd have to kind of look at that. But that's one of the scenarios that I'm okay with snapping. In general, I like to play it safe and not put myself in difficult situations. So that's kind of it. I hope it made sense. I was really trying to get this into a condensed form where I can explain all the things I needed to talk about to illustrate mathematically why I don't think snapping on turn 6 is a good idea. Again, I hope it made sense. If it didn't, let me know in the comments. I can try to redo it or something. But as usual, if you love all things Marvel Snap and you love video games, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.